Hi there, this is Justin. In this video, I'm going to give you some project management tips that will help you complete your work quicker and at a higher level. I'm going to be focusing on analyses. Analyses are often complex pieces of work with a lot of moving pieces, and I've seen often throughout my career that analysts don't do enough project management work and stay organized enough around with their analyses. This results in work that might need to be done in a day or two, sometimes taking weeks to complete. So let's jump in and get started with the first tip, which should be to use a task management solution, project management solution, however you want to describe it. And my company, Project BI, we're big fans of Asana. I have in front of you an example of a task in Asana. This is the first time you're seeing Asana. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it. If you're not using a project management solution at your company, don't stress. It's not the end of the world. I'm still going to cover basically the concepts that I'm going to be covering are still relevant, and you should take those and implement them however you can. If it's in a Word document, even pen and paper is a good way to kind of think through how to conduct an analysis in a very organized way. So in this Asana task, we've got our title up here, we've got the assignee. I guess the first obvious thing with an analysis is who exactly has been assigned the work, right? That needs to be obviously clear. If you're part of a team of analysts and a manager comes and gives the analysis to say 2 or 3 analysts, it's not a good idea. Maybe 2 or 3 analysts can work on it, but there should be one person who's the main, who's responsible for the analysis. In this case, just in this example, it's myself. Next thing is due date. That's very important. Like, up until when do we need this analysis? Is there a very strict date where it needs to be delivered? That would be the second piece of information that needs to be, clear and recorded. If there isn't a specific due date, then fine. I would still set one based on, the reality of the work that you have. So if you're very overloaded and it's not a very high urgency analysis, then maybe a week into the future or 2 weeks in the future makes sense. The further out you push it, the worse. It's not so great if it's so pushed so far into the future, just because think about it like this: if someone requests an analysis and they don't care if you give it to them in 2 or 3 weeks or a month or 3 months down the road, they'll probably forget, move on to the next thing, and therefore it wasn't that important to begin with, right? If it's kind of a nice to have, then kind of push back on that and say, you know what, I'd rather work on something which has higher urgency. So that's due date's very important. In Asana, you also assign tasks, we put tasks inside projects. In this case, just for this example, it's in my personal project, but it could be if you're using Asana in the project of the department or something like that. It's not, that's just specific for Asana, not too critical. The next thing is urgency and importance. So at my company, we've quite recently implemented what you call the Eisenhower Matrix. This is just kind of a prioritization methodology where you've got something, you have urgent and not urgent up here, and you've got important and not important up here. So you've got a 2x2 matrix. Something that's urgent and important would be here. Something that's not urgent and not important would be over here. So it's good to have, these, we have these 2 options for every task in our Asana, and it does help with understanding in this example, it's both urgent and important, and that means we got to do it now, right? If it's urgent, not important, delegate. So, I'm not only an analyst in the company, but I'm also running the company. So if it was, urgent, not important, maybe I delegate it to a team member, or, kind of push it further down the list. And if it's not important and not urgent, not important, then once again, you push back. Like, why do we even bother doing it? And if it's important and not urgent, then, we push it further down the road and work on something that's urgent and important. So long story short, decide on the overall importance of this piece of work, and, ask the person that's assigned it to you to determine that. Another way to think about this is something can be either low, medium, or high priority. People then typically don't like low because it's got like a negative connotation. So everything will be, highly, important. So, high priority. So you might fall into that trap. Next, just a nice little thing, what type of work we're talking about here. So if an analyst is working on all kinds of, tasks, if it's dashboard development, or, looking over reports, then just having different types of work might make sense. In our case at Project BI, we got data modeling, we have infrastructure strategy work. It's just a nice way to kind of be able to group all the work in a smart way and see visually how it works. Okay, going back to the project management side of things, what I've got here is a bunch of questions which I think are very relevant for business analysts to ask or to understand before they even jump into the analysis, right? So in this case, we want to understand who requested the analysis. So if it's just kind of vague, the marketing team wants to know something, it's not great, because you want to work with a specific stakeholder, a specific decision maker in the company, and make sure they're satisfied, right? So in this case, John, who, might be the CEO at the company, right? In this example, he is the CEO. So, John requests the analysis. The request, I like to record the exact words that were sent. If it was an email, if it was a Slack message, what did the individual that requested the piece of work actually ask? I'm starting talks with investors starting next week, and I need to understand our user retention. Can you conduct an analysis that looks into this? This is exactly what John sent us in this hypothetical example. So I like to record that. And the reason for that is because you also, as an analyst who's been given work, you also got to kind of protect yourself. If John said, for example, I want you to look at X, and then you do X, you send it to John, and now he's like, I wanted Y, you can always reference back to the original request. So I like to include that over here, just in the details of the project. So if it wasn't clear, we're talking about a retention analysis. Is kind of the hypothetical example. What is the goal of the analysis? This is very important, right? Before you want to do anything, what are we trying to achieve? You have to ask that question, right? Because sometimes the person requesting the work will say, can you do X for me? And he thinks by doing X, he answers a certain question, where if you don't ask him what is he trying to do, and he says, I want to answer this question, you might come up with a completely different approach to get to that answer than the person thought. It's not really their job to give you the solution to their problem. They need to tell you their problem, and you come up with a solution, if that makes sense. What is the goal of the analysis? The business wants to raise funding and needs to get a general idea of user retention. Okay, now it's a bit clearer, right? The date range. So now we get kind of into the technical information that's relevant for us to do the work. What is the date range in mind? users that signed up in the last 6 months, relevant data sources, where we're going to take the data. So BigQuery, so in this example, there's a data warehouse. We want the users table and user events table. Let me just add that here. Main deliverables. So what are we actually wanting to deliver? Do we just want a yes or no answer? Do we want a set of numbers? Do we want a list of users? What is the deliverable, the thing that we need to put in the hands of the person that requested the analysis? In this case, tabular report showing retention curve. We want a 30-day buckets. That's going to be our columns, and then user sign up week as cohorts. That's going to be our rows. So we're looking for a table that we can then use to turn into a curve, right? Any blockers, foreseeable issues. So this is very important. If you're part of a startup and you're like the chief analyst or you're part of a team, it's important to kind of have a general idea of what's going on in the company, and also know enough about the underlying infrastructure and the data that's available to really know at this point, before you get started, are there any blockers or issues that could prevent you from completing this piece of work, right? If John comes to us and says, can you do this analysis, and we know that we're missing critical data to answer this question, then we can immediately say to John, listen, we need to rethink this. Let's think together how we can check off this, this request, because we understand it's important. Because we don't have X, Y, and Z. Maybe we can go with A and B. Does that make sense, right? So what are the issues that could hold us back from delivering this work? And adding this, in the description of the task, so we can see here. So need to check if we have event data going back 6 months. So in this hypothetical example, we want to take users that signed in the last 6 months. We need to know what they did, their events, so we can build out a retention curve graph, and therefore we need to see if we have event data going back 6 months. The next thing that's very important when conducting an analysis, and this is also a good check to see if you're a strong analyst or not. A strong analyst, if you give them a piece of work, you tell them I need an analysis done that shows X, Y, and Z. In their head, they should be able to draw up an action plan, basically a plan to, the steps they would take in order to conduct the analysis at a high level, right? There's always going to be nuances and little things they run into along the way, but from a higher level, what is your attack plan? What is your action plan to get this done? So if it helps you, write it out. And if you're not sure, if, maybe you get up to step 4 and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Then already at this early stage in the process, you can then go to a senior analyst, you can go to your manager and say, I've kind of worked out I can get to this point, but I'm now stuck. Where do I go from here? Right? So if you're a strong analyst, you probably don't even need to write this out. You have an idea in your head. But as I said, if you're still an up-and-coming analyst and want to sharpen your skills, then when you're given a piece of work like a retention analysis, start thinking it through. The worst thing you can do is you can jump in with a very vague idea and you get stuck, and then you don't actually reach out for help. And then days go by and then you're not able to meet your due date, right? So I see this a lot, that some analysts will just kind of wing it. They're not really that strong on the underlying data and the request. They haven't asked the right questions up here to really understand what the goal is. And the reason I'm recording this video, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, is that the reason BI-related projects take a lot longer to complete is not typically because, you hit a blocker, even though that does sometimes happen. Is that you went a certain direction that was completely wrong without kind of stopping, thinking through asking the right questions, and either you deliver a piece of work which doesn't really meet the goals of the request, or you made certain assumptions, you didn't do enough planning, and then you end up getting stuck, or going in the wrong direction. So once you've got that action plan down, the next step would be to actually draw out, write up the subtasks, the different different milestones along the way. This is really getting deep into it. If it's something that it's a few hours of work and it's top priority, just get into it and get it done. But if you want to be super organized, then drawing out the subtasks with the different steps, the different fallbacks. So in this example, we're checking if there's data. That's kind of the first potential blocker that we identified. So we need to take care of that first. We're going to then provide an update to John. So communication is really, really important here. Just make sure you're continuously updating the person that requested the work, so he isn't left hanging. If he knows it's going to take a week, then after 3 or 4 days, just send him a quick message. I'm on it. I'm working on the deliverable now, and we're on schedule. Another important thing, if possible, is to check your results with someone else. So often, you're working on something that takes a lot of hours. You get a bit blind. Maybe you missed something, statistical, anomaly that is in the data, but you're kind of blind to it because you're really focused on moving it forward, and there's a lot of pressure potentially. I love the idea of bringing in a fresh pair of eyes, your manager or another analyst that knows the data, sit them through the first part, right? What are we trying to do? Give them the updates, and then walk them through. I did this, I did this, I did this. This is what I'm seeing. Does that make sense to you? Just get the sign off from the second individual. Then obviously we're happy. We built the deliverable. We've checked it. It looks good. These are the insights we gather from it. And then you actually sit down with the stakeholder, share. Keep on saying stakeholder. I mean the person that requested the work. He's often going to be a stakeholder in the company in terms of having responsibilities. So anyway, you'll sit down with the individual. You'll share the deliverable and the findings. Often there's going to be follow-up tasks. So, okay, they wanted to look at it by a week, but now actually it makes more sense after looking at the data to look at it by month. So often there's going to be follow-up additions or changes to the work. And then often you would have to go back. So maybe there's a second round. You sit down with John again, go through it. Now he's happy. He's got everything he needs. Make sure he gives you the thumbs up that we can mark this as completed. And then that's really the last step in the process, which would be to mark the task completed. And yeah, we're done. Another thing which I find to be very helpful, especially with projects, something like a really robust analysis that can take a long time, is just to write some updates. So Asana has some features that are really good around this on like the project level, but if it's just an individual task like this, you can just write comments and tag different people. So I would just tag John, update, just letting you know, blah blah blah, where we are. And here you can see, I created the data set, and unfortunately we don't have relevant data going back 6 months. So this blocker that we saw was actually a blocker. Went back to John, and he suggested we go with, a completely different approach, and made a note here that we have the tables, so we're able to move forward. So the reason this is very helpful is, just imagine I now have to shift to another piece of work, something even more important came up, and John, the CEO, he's like, hand this to a team member. I really need you to work on this. Some investors ask me for something specific. I've got to send it in 48 hours. Then having these notes here, these updates are very, very helpful, because if all of this work is now assigned to another analyst, that's really got to start from the beginning. then having these notes, especially around which data to use and the methodology you want to go with, is super, super helpful. So that's it. Just a quick summary to wrap up. When working on a complex analysis, there's the way you should tackle it is, if you're using a task management solution, a project management solution, then go in and write it up, set the priorities, the due dates, all the relevant information around the piece of work. Start asking a lot of questions so you really understand at a deep level what's being asked. The technical questions as well: which data should we use, the date ranges we want to use, the fields, the tables, all the technical stuff. You as a business analyst should know, once you understand the question, where to get the information. But if you don't, go to your team member, your manager, R&D, whoever you need to. Then after you've understand the goal and what needs to be delivered, think through an action plan. How exactly should I tackle it? Write that out if it's helpful. Draw up all the steps. Would be just going an extra step, and then make sure throughout the process you're writing updates and notes so that there's the communication aspect of it, so the person that requests the work can see the progress that you're working through it. But more importantly, if the work has to be delivered to someone else, has to be delegated to someone else, that they can take over and have all the relevant information at their disposal to complete the project. So that's it. I really hope this was helpful. If it was, please go ahead and hit the like button. It does help get the word out to more analysts like yourself. It's great feedback for me as well to see which videos you like and provide value. And if you have any questions on this topic, any suggestions, any ideas of things you're doing at your company around project management for BI related work, then please let me know in the comment section below. That'd be great. I love to learn new things, and to be good for the community as well. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.